Awesome. Well, thank you, Abby. As always, I'm going to steal the screen from you here, and then Frank and I are going to get into it. So it's been just over a year now since we at UberEther, in partnership with SailPoint, released our IAM Advantage platform, and that was completed at the DISA-DSOG up to Impact Level 5 certification. And then we received reciprocity for that back in September of last year to run all the way up to FedRAMP High. So there's been a lot of changes and updates inside of the identity industry over the last year, a lot of new emerging patterns and capabilities that are some being driven by everyone's favorite buzzword of AI, some being driven by everyone's other favorite buzzword of zero trust, and then some that are actually adding a lot of value and benefits. I was at RSA last week, and the resounding was a lot of the AI and machine learning capabilities built off of the generative AI capabilities that we're seeing today, like ChatGPT, at least within cybersecurity and identity, are still trying to prove and find the use cases versus some of the more proven feature-rich capabilities, like we'll dig into some of the new features on the SailPoint IdentityIQ side today. So let's dig in a little bit and get through that. So we can say for sure, though, that a lot of the challenges in IAM really haven't changed much over the last year. There's a lot of issues trying to update, migrate, or maintain legacy systems. The user bases are greatly expanding, whether that's citizen-facing services or the federal government's move more towards a federated identity baseline. There's more and more ability for more and more people to get access to government and civilian agency or federal government, as well as state and local agencies, critical data. The security threats, I will say, over the last year have gone through the roof. With generative AI, that is one place that we've seen a ton of ability for really what was previously less sophisticated actors being able to automate based on the data dumps, doing data scrapes, and doing way more targeted phishing and vishing campaigns. And we still haven't figured out how to clone identity and access management cybersecurity professionals. The two that are on this call, we probably would not make candidates for cloning because it would be a heck of a world if we did. Definitely pretty opinionated. So today we're going to run through an overview of UberEther's IAM Advantage platform, some of the successes and wins we've had over the last year, some of the reasons we keep investing and doubling down on this. One of the big things that was a theme at RSA last week was identity resiliency. Right? We've seen a lot of challenges with ransomware attacks or takeovers that by putting all of your cards in one basket, whether that's endpoint and identity together, or relying on just one identity system in the cloud, really has had major issues, right? I'll just leave it at that, in being able to recover if you are breached and even just protect your organization. So we'll dig into some of those. SailPoint had a major update in the fall, bringing some of their previously cloud-only capabilities into the on-premises or single tenant style deployments of hosting that Frank and I are both really excited for, especially for our federal government users that have been clamoring to get access to some of these capabilities. And now they can run them completely independently on their own. And then we will talk a little bit about places we do see AI and automation making a difference in identity. So with that, we'll go on just a recap of what is UberEther's IAM Advantage. So as I said, FedRAMP High, as well as up to DoD, DSOG approved, CCSRG approved Impact Level 5. So the highest security systems that still reside on the internet within the federal government. Our biggest differentiator is we put you in control of your data and make it so that your data is not shared with any other tenant. We give you the flexibility, the cost savings of having a cloud managed service for all of these key capabilities, but all of your data is truly isolated only to your tenant. And that's done with an encryption key that each customer individually controls. So there is no way for that data to bleed across services or one major provider compromising everybody, because every one of our customers, every one of our clients, their own accounts and their own root keys in their own organization would also need to be compromised for an attacker to get anything valuable out of the system. And then with that, we've also integrated not only SailPoint, but other vendors like Ping for single sign-on and federation, Radiant Logic to build up master user records and directories, being able to bring in all of that data that we're using inside of CDM and the open source cybersecurity frameworks to use that for decision making, for authentication and authorization, and giving account access, as well as agile deployment capabilities. So everything is built into CI/CD pipelines. Every update and change is automatically compiled in and deployed into the services, but it also gives you versioning, backup, and recovery capabilities like some of the cloud providers do not, in that you can say, what exact configuration was in production at this time? Did I really have a two-person commit when I was making configuration changes to meet all of my FSMA requirements? Or if you get an admin, you can make changes directly without someone else, like some of the other cloud providers. We build all of those extra levels of security and control that are critical for the federal government. And then with that, a ton of increased automation, not only in those CI/CD pipelines, but also with the tools and capabilities from end to end. A contractor gets hired, they get put on a contract. Within that contract, they get put into a database administrator role. Well, we automatically know as part of that contract what the databases are, what privileged accounts are in your CyberArks or Beyond Trust that they should get access to get access to the underlying systems and data to manage those things, right? All of those things are brought together. Or if you need to introduce a new application with groups and roles, how does that configuration as code get brought in and automated as you move them between environments? So we'll kind of bang through some stuff. I know we're about 11 minutes in already here. So again, cloud-based, automated, self-service, and built on agile methodologies. That also comes with a ton of playbooks for you to run your own enterprise programs and really distribute it across the organization so you're not tied to a single integrator or a single IAM program. You can move at the speed of need. So with SailPoint, we've done a ton of work to future-proof capabilities. So not only do we provide this as an enterprise service that is managed, maintained for you, patching, upgrades, all the automations around it, but also have it bundled so it can be deployed anywhere your applications run, any data center, any cloud environment, any disconnected environment as well. So when you have things like the Department of Defense's Big Bang or some of the flyaway kits with FEMA during a disaster where, hey, this kit is, we might have 50 of the same kits going out and the same applications and services are deployed there. Well, the way we've built it with SailPoint is that when you deploy apps into those hardware platforms, we know when those are triggered for deployment, and then we automatically bring them into SailPoint to be governed. So there's no coordination of your teams, no coordination of updates and upgrades and releases, right? As they're triggered through the deployment pipelines into the environment, we're picking up those triggers and then putting their configurations automatically into SailPoint. Adaptive security, we'll get into that with some of the AI and risk analytics later. And then the hundreds of connectors and supporting workflows that we build at UberEther on top of it. So just real quick, I'll talk a little bit about that IAM resiliency. We've all seen some of the major breaches that have gone on, some of the major hacks, the way that identity, even if it isn't the first attack that happens, the way the attackers break in, the first pivot is always to the identity and access management systems, because they know that is the quickest route to get to privileged accounts to take over more critical pieces of the infrastructure, whether that's breaking into the box that does password sync up into your cloud environment if you're using one of the cloud hosting provider or cloud SaaS providers, or if it's even breaking into your local Active Directory domains. They know identity is the key place to do that. And a lot of times, if they take out your ability to authenticate and authorize as administrators when their attack happens, they leave you pretty much with your pants down from ability to get into those systems and recover them until you pay their ransom. So the real push in the industry has been, and this is something I see us failing to plan and design well for in the federal government right now, is right in zero trust, we're not making one control plane. We're not necessarily making all these applications all part of one policy administration point. We're specifically saying these applications run at these locations, or they run within these data centers, or they run as part of these missions, or they're all finance applications. And you might have an enterprise identity provider, but you should also probably think about how you enforce the identity providers locally with those missions, with those verticals, within those specific data centers, so that if that centralized provider is compromised, you can break that trust link and allow the people to operate independently. It also gives you a lot more flexibility when you might say, hey, this set of systems is in information sharing portals and applications and services and APIs and web services. And we know that's for external information sharing. So you might have an IDP there and a SailPoint identity governance system to say, here's all the outside agencies, here's all the outside firms, maybe commercial organizations that we're federating with. And that is trusted to that bubble, that really surrounding trust boundary of information for external information sharing. And those accounts and pieces don't bleed over in such a way that an attacker could pivot into your internal systems and services. That's something we started building and implementing in the federal government with SailPoint over a decade ago at DHS for the Homeland Security Information Network. So really, just as you are designing your identity systems, don't forget you need to really design not silos, but trust boundaries, and determine where those trusts are and where they can be broken to allow you to continue to operate in terms of if you have a breach, or some of your partners might have a breach. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank to talk a little bit about the new enhancements in IdentityIQ 8.4 and how they can benefit the federal government customers on the IAM Advantage platform.
Thanks, Matt. I think, yes, starting off with access history that was included in 8.4 is absolutely critical. It's an extension of the UI, so you're going to see some UI changes right off the bat. And I think that's important in viewing actually visualizing the who has access, how did they get it, those typical questions that we say we answer. This puts it right in front of the administrator or user's eyes. It gives us the ability to see how attributes and events are changing over time, and gives us the ability to actually look back and say, well, Matt had access 6 months ago. He doesn't now. What changed? And I think that's one of the things that, we've been trying to articulate as we've been talking about zero trust for so long, right? Is that those, if we're using those attributes as our keys to the kingdom now, we should know what impact they have when they change. And this is going to give us that, right? This is going to give us that history over time. And we're using that, we're using that ability in access history, expanding our data intelligence. And then we're also making it easy to take that data and use it elsewhere, right? We realize we're not the only tool that you're using for analytics. You're using other interfaces. So it's always been somewhat of a challenge to get the data out in the data format that you actually need and want in a timely manner. So one of the enhancements that we've seen a lot of interest in the 8.4 platform is that ability to extract the data, make it easy to get it out to power your analytics across the board. That's allowing us to use other BI tools, define which objects, which properties we want to export, and then also transform data to make it more accessible and more usable. We're laying another layer of data intelligence and AI type capabilities to define and discover access that's common across the organization. So looking for like users, looking for outliers. Absolutely, that AI role mining, the ability to automatically model and create birthright roles. Hey, we'd all like to say roles are dead, right? But I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think within Matt and I's lifetime we're gonna be. We're close, but in reality, there's still birthright entitlements and birthright things we get assigned to based on who we are, what we know about us, and it's not a just-in-time thing. It is a persistent access that we're going to need. But this allows us to reduce role proliferation. So as you can see, we're taking the data, and this should be, things that are very key for our federal customers, not only our Department of Defense customers, but also our federal civilian agencies that are operationalizing that data that we're using in, I'll use air quotes, the master user record, right? Wherever that record resides, whether it's in an LDAP container or in our own database, operationalizing that data is key. So, we're expanding that whole data intelligence plane within the platform along, within 8.4. There's also some other capabilities around some key things, and I don't know if you included those in here, Matt. But the read-only object config page. If you've ever used the object browser and said, wow, everyone can see everything in here if they have access to this, we've made that a little more difficult to do. So, and then there's some future stuff we'll hit later on, Matt.
Okay. So, Frank, before I click onto the next one, I think it's important to point out to folks that these AI role mining capabilities, they've been part of the SailPoint platform for, I think we're going on 4 or 5 years at this point, just in their cloud services. And SailPoint saw the federal government customer saying, we love this. This would make this so much better to us. But we're concerned about it going into your cloud environment to make these decisions, right? Because SailPoint would push those out and munge them and with all the other customers to be able to compare and contrast it and really use some of the horsepower that not a lot of organizations had on premises at that time, right? 5 years ago, we were just starting to move things into the cloud, and they've brought those capabilities back into the product so that they can run within private tenant environments like ours in IAM Advantage or within the customer's own data centers to keep that level of security that's required in the federal government. So, this isn't, there's a ton of vendors and your competitors that are saying, look at our great new AI tools and capabilities and all these brand new things that a lot of times they're unproven. And they're just jumping on the AI bandwagon for marketing right now, versus this is something that's been proven by SailPoint through customer use over the last 5 years that's proving to drive value rather than someone's new whiz-bang widget that they are putting hopes and dreams on of fixing later. And that's nothing at digging any other vendor. That's just where a lot of the industry is, and proves how far ahead SailPoint's been in some of these areas.
Yeah, that's true, Matt. Your check will be in the mail. But that is absolutely true in that, we did recognize that our customers were asking for similar capabilities that were being put in our leading SaaS product, but we needed to bring them back into the IdentityIQ platform. We have a lot of great things coming in the future in IdentityIQ. And, I hear all the time, or I get calls or emails or texts, what's happening with IdentityIQ? Is it going away? No, not at all. Not at all. We have, a future roadmap that is, very strong. We're building out the capabilities that are akin to some of the things that are being released in the SaaS platform. We're bringing them back into IdentityIQ where it makes sense, where we need them. Some things that are being developed in Identity Security Cloud are already in IdentityIQ. It's a matter of the approach of how you go about doing things. But I think the key with some of the data intelligence that's happening, that is going to be key for a lot of our customers that are struggling with how to get data out into their larger data lakes and BI tools, and how to also look at that access history, because I hate the zero trust buzzword, but let's be realistic. It's creating the need for us to look at behavior, and I consider attribute changes part of that behavior that we need to look at, right? Because we are really taking attributes about us and making them the key policies that grant us access, and that can be dangerous. We are humans that manage these systems, and we make mistakes. Look at some of the cloud configuration breaches. Where it was a stupid policy change that, oops, we left our data completely exposed. So absolutely.
All right. And then not always the most exciting part, but we know some customers have been asking for these connectors. So
yeah, absolutely. These are things, these were gaps that we were filling in. And also, the whole SAP Concur environment, whether we're tactical or we're sitting in a desk, chances are we're traveling, and wouldn't we want that to be a lot easier, right? Expenses should be made easy for all of us. Spoken by someone who's about to travel for 2 weeks. But yeah, with Coupa and BMC Helix, we're keeping up with the call it SaaSification of all of the enterprise systems, and we're building those into IdentityIQ as well. So as I said, where IdentityIQ benefits along with our SaaS platform is they share the same connector framework. So if a connector is built for IdentityIQ, we can use it in Identity Security Cloud. If it's built for Identity Security Cloud, we can bring it back into IdentityIQ. It's just a little different to enable it and get it there. You may have to wait for a patch, but that forces you to keep your patches up to date. And I'll knock on the table there about patching and remediation, right?
that's our job at IAM Advantage. So
exactly.
About it. That's our value.
Exactly.
Then, Frank, I don't think I've actually shown you this yet, but our team took some of the new connector updates and interface updates in 8.4 and kind of abusing some of the new AI capabilities that are built into Google. But we've, right, you've seen some of the patterns where someone might record, create, update, deletes, adding to groups, adding to roles with some of the RPA tools, yep. Right? And then using SailPoint to call some of the RPA tools to generate these where connectors don't exist, or a system might be older and might not have API interfaces to do those calls, or not access the underlying databases. But we actually showed that we're able to have like a help desk administrator do recordings of all of their normal create, update, deletes, adding people, deleting people in just a normal video, and then have been using Google's AI Studio. And this blew me away in AI Studio, but take those videos and send them in to say, hey, I've got this set of libraries and interfaces from SailPoint, and this is the video of doing create, updates, and deletes. And Google AI Studio is actually smart enough to go, oh, that screen is part of Microsoft Azure, or that screen is part of, we use a tool called Pipedrive for our CRM at UberEther, and there's no SailPoint connector for that. So we took that and they go, oh, that's a Pipedrive interface. And it went, for Pipedrive, there is an API. And even though we were doing the updates on the screens and the forms, it knew that was Pipedrive and that Pipedrive had an API, and it generated the connector code for us that then called the APIs and didn't even mimic the screen flows.
Wow.
And then for tools that didn't have the APIs or didn't know about it, it would actually put it into Playwright, which is Microsoft's basically browser mimicking tools that behave the same way. If you remember, like when we were trying to do automated testing with Selenium years ago, Frank, this is Selenium on steroids. But Google's AI Studio would actually generate the Playwright code to rerun that for us if we didn't have an ability to call an API on the other side. So for us, that's been an extremely powerful way to integrate a lot of the legacy applications that used to take sometimes months of development, or days of development, but months of meetings in the past.
And as I think is the first or second slide, Matt, that we were showing, we're still struggling. Our customers are still struggling with integrating legacy systems, and having partners like UberEther that are thinking way out of the box, using tools like this to streamline that is, love it.
Yeah,
impressive. Absolutely.
There's so many internal applications that have been built over decades, right? We always joke like the mainframe still runs every IRS tax return, or my wife works for Old Dominion Trucking Company and all of their pricing and scheduling is done on a mainframe.
Yep.
They're not going away.
No. And that's the good thing of being part of a company that's not an infant in this space, with founders that have been around since the beginning, and have defined this space. They get that, right? And we get that. And we're not calling connectors SAML configurations. And I have to laugh and chuckle when I hear some identity vendors say, we have over 30,000 connectors. No, that's not a connector. A connector is intelligent. It's smart. It can transform data. It can process things. It has a workflow associated with it. It's not just a configuration that says, yeah, we trust this IDP for our configuration. So yeah, that's impressive stuff, Matt. You haven't shown me that, and I want the 3-second tour at some point.
Yeah, it was one of those things where we were like, let's just try this and see. And it quickly became one of those holy moly moments. See, I'm getting better at using my sailor's mouth, but this just changed how we can help federal agencies integrate thousands. And the good part is AI Studio is already part of Google's approved FedRAMP platform. So we don't have that worry either. Right. And so it's been pretty slick. And thank you, Abby, for throwing up question number 1. I completely missed doing that earlier. And it looks like everybody had a good answer of what are the primary challenges driving the need for future-proofed IAM solutions in the federal sector. And that increasing resilience That's probably the number one of the three, but all of the above was the right one. Abby, if you don't mind throwing up question number 2 for us so we can make sure everyone gets their CPE credits here in the last 20 minutes or so.
Yep, throwing it up right now.
All right, so I'll start chatting a little bit about some of the user behavior analytics and additional capabilities that we've been able to extend based on the SailPoint 8.4 changes. But while we're doing that, what is the role of UberEther's IAM Advantage in the overall IAM solution for federal agencies? And no, we didn't put snarky answers in there, but I probably should have. So let's dig in while folks are answering that question to some of the user behavior analytics solutions that are delivered and actually capable today and running at federal agencies. So Frank and I have been kind of working on and driving some of these. We earlier in our careers called them the cyber kill chain because it sounded really awesome to say things like that in meetings. But there is a number, right? 20 minutes of an adversary in our network owns us. And there is so much data and telemetry that is being put at our SOC and NOC analysts who are looking at system level logs that it's nearly impossible to close that 20-minute window. So Frank and I have been working for 10 plus years at this point of how can we use identity? How can we expose interfaces to help close that window, whether it's a NOC SOC analyst seeing a behavior that looks peculiar, or now we're getting a lot more of automated abilities to say, hey, we're going to put this account on pause, or we're going to kill that session, force them to re-authenticate and reauthorize, or that behavior is a little weird, not enough to stop them, but enough to tell their manager and make them recertify their access. So really been able to drive a lot of new changes and capabilities that are, as I said, true and working today rather than some of the hopes and dreams we've seen lately. So thanks everyone who answered question number 2. So yes, we facilitate secure and compliant access to cloud-based applications and services. We give you a centralized integrated platform up in, I mean, we literally proved 2 weeks up and running with production data at the Air Force with 4 million users. So within days, and that was running through full SailPoint joiner, mover, leaver workflows for service members, civilians, and contractors. We weren't directly provisioning the accounts after those 2 weeks, but we were triggering everything and sending the emails to a mock email server to show exactly how our assumptions of how that data worked and flowed were evaluating it true or not. Something that Frank will tell you is normally 12 to 18 months in for most program implementations. And then with that, enabling more of an agile and scalable distribution. No longer do you have to worry about getting servers, increasing your capacity. That's our problem, not yours. And some of the benefits of using Amazon to do that, as well as just scaling up those servers during the day when you're using them or when the data loads are happening, and then slimming them back down when they're not needed anymore. Frank talked a little bit about the access history, which is great from an audit perspective of if you do have a breach or you do have a problem, or why did that person have access to that 6 months ago, but they don't today? A lot of products don't know that history and keep it in there that you can go back to any point in time and say, what did that person have then? But moreover, with that, with the IAM Advantage solution, we also can tell you exactly what code was in production at that time, because we're versioning all of those releases every time we push the updates in, which is, if you've ever been in an audit as part of a breach or part of going back in history to understand what and why happened, those are answers that you normally can't provide because nobody thinks about what was my exact configuration in production 6 months, 3 years ago versus what it is today. So really able to answer some tough questions and the hard situations that you don't realize you need to answer, but until you've been there. So, getting back to the UBA side of the world, we've, with SailPoint, with partners like Splunk and Exabeam and ArcSight, Google, and a bunch of others, being able to do real-time risk-based decisions on the platform. So what do I mean by that? Not only can we do the simple things. What time of day is it? Does Frank work on Mountain Time or does he work on East Coast time? Why is he coming in at 5 a.m. Mountain? Maybe he should be. Maybe there's a patch upgrade and we've got a window this time. Right? That's what IP address is he consistently coming from and what part of the country. That's the easy stuff today. That should be table stakes for anyone that really plays in the identity and access management industry. But we're now taking that beyond of what are the people's behaviors within the browser? Are they really moving the mouse around in a logical pattern? Or is the mouse magically jumping to the point to click a submit button? Right? That's when we see bots, or that's when we see automated systems that have compromised the account trying to take over. What machine does Frank normally come from? Is he a Mac guy? Is he a Windows guy? Is he running his own build of BSD Linux that he compiles the kernel nightly? Frank used to be that nerdy.
Not any longer.
Long time ago, but not anymore. Neither am I. But we do have people like that in our organizations. And is this their normal pattern? They might be a Mac user, but they always use Chrome. Why are they using Safari today? Or why are they using Firefox? Those are all pieces to the risk-based decisions. And then pulling that into saying, based on their attributes, based on their changes. You might have hired someone brand new onto a program, and they're supposed to be a database administrator. But you might want to give them 2 weeks or 2 months of really tracing their individual access at deep layers across these systems. Give them what they need to do their job, but they're going to have logging turned up to 11 for their accounts while they're building trust with the organization. Right? Making those real-time risk-based decisions that are right in the context, not only of the role, but the individual users. And then if they step out of those, be able to flag their manager and say, hey, the new guy immediately went to prod. And he didn't even bother learning what this thing looked like in Dev or Test. And immediately started running highly privileged execs inside of that prod database. Might be something, you brought him in as an expert and that's what he was supposed to do. But as his manager, as his program owner, we're just gonna give you a heads up and a link to the dashboard of behaviors. And sometimes we might think it's enough that we're gonna make sure you looked at that dashboard and reviewed the access that they've been given and give them and you've got to certify that today to say, yep, I know, I looked at it, but it's still good enough. And then sometimes we might terminate immediate access. So if we see that it's an account that we expect to come in with a good set of AAL level 3 credentials, well, that's good. That's about the highest most systems in federal government get for telemetry today. But if we also see that every page load is done in milliseconds, that they're not even clicking on the screen and they're just essentially going directly to elements through what looks like a bot and automation, we're going to terminate that session. And we might put them on a disable list until a SOC analyst has time to mitigate it. But at that point, we've closed that 20-minute attacker window to milliseconds. So all of that through SailPoint's new abilities to export the data into native formats that both the BI tools, the SIMs can pick up from, but also the interfaces and workflows we've built for those systems to turn around and make real-time changes within the access environments. And that moves all the way across privileged governance, as well as browser and single sign-on, and all the way down to the desktop as well. So, Frank, anything I'm forgetting on that with some of the stuff we've been doing?
You know, some of the way of the future, right? And you and I have been working on this for quite some time. we did actually do a similar exercise with ForcePoint as well with their UEBA platform. And what we realized is in that UEBA platform, taking threat intelligence as well, right? Marrying that to that integrate everywhere strategy. Yeah, I think you got it here. Really looking to detect those anomalies, you need a lot of information, right? You need to understand what's normal for Frank. But that privileged access monitoring, understanding what that privileged user is doing or what they're trying to do, what they normally do. The identity data allows us to do that contextual analysis like you were talking about. The key is, what do you do when you find it, right? And that's the automated response and remediation. And that's where that hook to SailPoint comes in. And I think that's lost on some people, right? Where we don't really get the SOC people talking to the identity folks, so they don't understand that there's this complete connection that they can make. And that just enables that continuous monitoring of your processes and improvement. And you're narrowing down using, call it some of those AI type capabilities to then build better roles or better assignment processes or do the things, like an access certification or an access remediation removal. So yeah, absolutely. And there's more to come with that. And we'll get there at a later webinar, I'm sure.
And I will say, right, SailPoint could have done the easy thing and said, oh, we're going to put the exports into a CSV format and then make it someone else's job to do the transforms to pull into Ceph or be able to load directly into the Open Cybersecurity Framework baseline. So for those that don't know CSF, right, you've got things like Microsoft Sentinel, Google's Chronicle that have their own data formats as you're building up kind of your zero trust data lakes. OCSF is the Open Cybersecurity Framework. They have a standards based with, I believe, we're over 100 organizations committing to the formats and the data tables that go into and how the actions are loaded, the identity records are loaded, the history of the identity records, right? All of those things are standardized. So not only is it gets it away from the vendor dependencies on some of the Google and Microsoft approaches today. But SailPoint went the extra mile and said, hey, we're going to generate this in Ceph format, which then there's already a converter that allows that. So Ceph is the formats that your Splunks and your ArcSights of the world will speak natively. And then those can also then be directly loaded into OCSF as well. So that, while seems little and like a one click on a feature thing, it's really impactful to the hunters and the SOC and NOC analysts to give them that visibility of the data and changes. So I guess that's a nice way of saying thank you for doing the right thing from day one, but that's no surprise for SailPoint.
Yeah. One of the things let me throw out, Matt, is we're very involved in some of the shared signals working groups. Mike Kaiser, who some of you may know, Mike leads our efforts there and he's doing a fantastic job. So there's things to come that I'm not at will to say right now. But with our work in this, it's going to make these transactions and this remediation and detection a lot closer to the identity stack.
Yeah, it's so for those that don't know, those standards, there's CAPE and RISC, and those are found on the OpenID consortium website. But things like, hey, I'm this SaaS provider, you can send policies to a SaaS provider that they have to enact and says, when a user behaves this way, we as an organization want to know about it. Or as an identity provider, if somebody binds a new credential, or they have a username and password that then is known to become compromised, right? Those things might trigger additional risk behaviors. They might trigger responses from something like SailPoint for an identity governance, and that is all being built in a more standardized way to glue all that together in a much easier path moving forward. So, well, Frank can't say exactly what they're doing from a product side of SailPoint. I can give you an idea of the capabilities through the standards that are being set. So we'll just dance that one that way. So, and then again, the benefits of this data going directly into Ceph or OCSF format is same data, same underlying capabilities. All of the vendors now know how to pick that up and use it to trigger, as well as by getting all that data into these large data lakes. We can use that to actually use real data and real proof to drive AI and machine learning things based on your individual organization's behaviors, not just hopes and guesses of algorithms based on academic papers. And that's really where the protection is going to be way more impactful than some of the things we're seeing today. So for everyone, our last question is up. If you want to go ahead and answer that, I take it back. We closed it. So how does SailPoint IdentityIQ contribute to a future-proofed IAM strategy? Comprehensive identity governance and administration, leverages AI and machine learning for predictive risk analysis and proactive threat detection, and enable seamless integration with existing systems and workflows. So again, all of the above, and delivered simply and easily without the headaches of patching and upgrading through UberEther IAM Advantage. There, that'll be my plug for the day. So yeah, again, some of these capabilities, as I said, available right now and integrated 360 right now is on the platform. You don't have to wait.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah,
As you're moving towards zero trust, this is the core of how to be successful. It's not what vendor products can you glue together. It's building a open, cohesive ecosystem of data and events that whatever system you pick and whatever system you pick next knows how to get this data and use it. So that data lake in OCF's standard is available as part of the UberEther platform. So if you don't have that moving today within your organization, you can use ours as the start to start pumping all of the data in. And all of the tools we have by default are driving their events, their logs, their user changes, their accesses into that in the standardized format today. So, and then with that, it'll allow us to drive a ton of custom workflows, data integrations, and ultimately a point to get to those risk-based automations. So preparing for the future, I threw a couple little things to take a look at as you're on this journey, identity journey in general, and some of the things we're moving towards between both of our organizations. So much of identity, much of cybersecurity today is reactive, right? Our goal is to move this to proactive. If I don't know about you, who are you closest to in what your roles are, your attributes are, your behaviors in the organization, and base your initial access and what your behavior should be off of those people. If you're brand new to the organization, your risk level is higher just because you're new. Or if you get promoted into a new job role, maybe in a different division completely, right? If you're an adversary, you might have been working to get that promotion because that's where the most critical data for the adversary to exploit and exfil is at. And you've worked 2 to 3 years to get there, right? Those are higher risk scenarios that we turn up the triggers on those users to be able to look at them closer. Or, hey, I'll tell you, this is something we found for one of our commercial customers. They had a password reset process that was not managed by us, but was coded by a third party, where you put in your first name, your last name, your employee number, and another piece of information. And then they would send you a Duo push notification. You put in your little code, and then you were able to reset your corporate password. Well, because of some of the analytic tools we put into the browser, we immediately found that one IP address, right? Not one user, one IP address was skipping the duo step. And they had found a bug in the code that allowed you to just put in a first name, a last name, an employee number, which you could literally run the gamut from 1,000 to 1 million. And then you could reset any person in the organization's enterprise password all the way up to the CIO directly from the web. The only reason we found that is because we were tracking the page flow behaviors of the users within the browser. And as soon as we saw that outlier of nobody has ever gone from step A to step C before, we threw the flag and called them. And we later found that it was an adversary that was selling access to their corporate networks at $5,000 a pop. Luckily, it hadn't been exploited or used in a malicious way as of yet. He had just started advertising that he could do it, but we caught it. So that's proactive security. Pay attention to the emerging tech, but also root it in your trusted partners that have lived this world for 20 plus years rather than newbies just trying to break in, because there's a lot of opportunity. And then with that, also, you've got to drive it back into your organization. Not only, it's not the identities team to secure the applications. It's got to be with your application developers, with your application owners from day one. And you've got to make it easy for them to do those integrations and really move at the speed they need to meet their mission needs, rather than having to wait in a queue for your own developers to be available to work with. So really try and take that approach of how can you build self-service tools? How can you build capabilities that let them test and validate on their own before submitting into your production environment, without having to build an army of identity people that you're not going to find anyways. So, Frank, we got 4 minutes left. Any other future-proofing scenarios or use cases that people should be thinking about today?
I think we've pretty much hit them all. You know, we stayed away from the good buzzwords, and I appreciate that. But you know, I think with many of the participants on the call and things like that, you know, zero trust is top of mind to everyone. So is compliance, right? And I will say this forever: neither one of those are individual sports. Those are team sports. The thing that you know, a lot of times compliance and zero trust have in common is that identity is the foundation, right? It truly is. You know, even Mr. Kinderbag agrees with us on that one. And you know, identity is the new perimeter, blah 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 blah. You know, we all know these things, but there's reality in it. And you know, integrate everywhere is one of those things that has to be top of mind. Is you know, you can't just have part of the picture. We have to be doing that contextual analysis. We have to have continuous monitoring improvement. We have to have things like you know, threat detection, threat awareness, and we have to tie these things together. And he who skips and tries to take the easy path on this will be doing it again in a couple of years after there, you know, there's vulnerabilities found or you know, there's a breach occurs. You know, and that's those are my parting words, Matt, for today. There is some other great things coming in the future of SailPoint IdentityIQ. Things like, you know, some user experience enhancements that are coming. I won't get into all those, but you know, there's some core areas around security, monetization, data privacy. We're building even further within the platform. So you know, making objects have a life cycle, not just identities. You know, making search easier. and more natural. So, you know, a lot of great things to come with the platform and building your future with the foundation being IdentityIQ.
All right, so that tells me we're gonna have to schedule another one of these for about 6 months from now, when the next version
9.
of.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take it as 9 then. So we'll kick it off right after the new year with all the new
Yes,
updates.
perfect timing. Perfect timing. Yep.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, and I'll kick it back to Abby to close us out.